Greetings, Git Cats. It's time for another chit chat. Number 53. 53. I've got my little whiteboard here and it says 53 with Josh Munday. Now, my headphones just said to me that phone 2 is disconnected. That could be a bad thing. That might mean that I can't hear my guests. And if that's the case, I will just have to turn them back on and turn it back on again because that's what you do. But who's at my door? Ding dong. No other than Mr. Josh Munday from Roland Bolt. Hey, Josh, how are you, man?
Good, thanks, Rick. Oh, that's the most applause I've had for a long time. I like that, though. Can you just keep that on standby, please?
I can. Okay, so that just confirmed that I can still hear you through that. That always happens with live stuff, and that's why people like to tune into the live broadcast because people love a train wreck. That had potential.
They do.
As I said to you before, I turned on my other computer and that tried to take over my my Bluetooth here, but everything is cool. When the little lady in my head says, phone 2 connected, that had me worried, but it's all good.
You gotta
Josh,
follow the voices.
Roland and Boss, Australia. How long have you worked for Roland and Boss in Australia?
Oh, straight into that. Wow, that's a long time. I started there in 98.
98,
so
okay.
That's 20, coming up to 23 years. Very soon.
It is.
And I'm not by any stretch the longest serving person at Roland Australia. So there's the few guys that had been there for maybe 4 or 5 years before me are mostly still there and very productive parts of the Roland. So yeah, it's a great place to work, and it's a great gang of people. And now there's a lot more younger people as does happen as you get older. So it's a really great culture and a great place to work.
Well, I think that is testament when people stick at a job for a long time. That means that they're working with good people and they don't want to look elsewhere. So
yeah,
that's great.
Yeah,
but I'm going to jump back a little because I do want to get you on as a bit of a regular to talk Boss and Roland products as they're being released. But I would like for the folks at home to get to know you a little. So I'm going to ask you the question that I normally start all my chats with, and that is, what started the love affair with guitar for you?
Guitar. Well, it's kind of intertwined with other things for me. So it's music in general. So I if I can go back a little bit further to work into that.
Yep.
Great. So I started keyboard. Had a thing for keyboards when I was maybe I think I was maybe 5, and wanted out of the blue like a 10 key keyboard, just all white keys, little thing. And I wanted that. It must have been at a supermarket or something, and I pestered my mum, pestered and got this keyboard. And there's no music in my family. It wasn't back then anyway. There's some of the younger cousins are into it now, but there certainly wasn't back then. So it was sort of in a vacuum. So I started, and the obsession started. I'm sure my mum would have rightly thought that would end at some point, or the fad would end, but it kept growing. And some sort of feedback loop. Whatever happens with musicians, you know it. Like we all have that thing. One day it feeds back to you, and you feel good about it, and you just keep doing it. And eventually do it in front of people, and you get to build your ego on it. And there's all sorts of feedback loops that keep happening. And that's how it was for me. It was, and it just kept going. So I kept playing. I had organ lessons, the 3 keyboard organs, doing the feet and everything.
Yep, that's how I started. Yep.
Yeah, right. Okay. There's so many people that I meet now that have a similar journey like this. They nod, and there's you meet these people as you go. I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And it's awesome because you just have all of these synergistic things happening in your life. So I had that, and then I think it was a fan forced organ, all sorts of strange keyboards that I had. And then maybe in high school I took up saxophone as well. And this is in Tasmania, by the way. I'm Tasmanian, so
okay.
This is the sunny shores of Tasmania. So I started playing saxophone, and terrible stereotype for Tasmania. I played a bit of banjo, and then I think, so I was well into high school when I started guitar. So I think I was around 13 or 14 when I started doing that. So I was well into an old Roland SH1000 that we had, one of the first synths. It had an old analog synth at Wynyard High School, where I was. And then we had a Yamaha DX7 Mark II, which was very flash. You know, many a jump lick was played on that. But I think my intro to Van Halen and therefore guitar and guitar shredding was kind of into that synthy guitar type rock that was around at the time, right? So that I love that. And I used to do a lot of recording with another drummer friend of mine in high school. We'd go in after hours and have key, and I remember just wanting to play all the parts. So I just started playing guitar more, and that's how it starts, right? And it gets at you. It's like the earworm for guitar, right? And then I think it was Richie Sambora, major thing for that at the time. Boston, Van Halen. God, man, there's, you know, all of the same things. I'm sure you could tell this story back to me and you'll have exactly the same bands, right? This is how these things go.
Absolutely. Well, I was surprised to learn talking to you the other day when I bumped into you that we're born in the same year, so we've probably got a lot of the same influences.
That's right.
And so you probably grew up learning to play Van Halen songs in the Van Hagar era, like I did. And then sort of going back over the old catalogs. But surprising that you started out.
That's right. Yeah.
Surprising that you also started out playing, you know, keys, sax, banjo, etc.
Yeah.
The fact that you work for Roland Boss, such a technology company, I'm guessing that's a great founding to have, roots in synthesizers and things, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's, for me, I've had people over the years say, "Gee, you're really lucky you work at Roland," and for me, absolutely deliberate. There was, you know, it wasn't a clear path because I don't think life works like that. But it certainly, when the opportunity arose, Roland was the one that I wanted to work for, because I went for from high school and playing in bands and different things. I think I started gigging around, I don't know, 14 or 15 or something, playing in bands, playing saxophone and a bit of guitar and stuff, and singing a bit. And then I went to university in Launceston to do music at uni, and so I was 17 or something. So whatever year that was, let's not dwell on that. And then I did saxophone and piano there initially, and then did guitar for the second year. But really, I wanted to play in rock bands. I didn't really want to be at school doing that, so I was playing more and more gigs, and that just sort of sucked me over this direction. And then I started working in a music store that happened to be a Roland dealer, and City Music in Launceston. So it must be early 90s. And, you know, working in a music store, sure, you know, right? Again, it's like you're kind of like you're the bartender, right? You're like the person that comes in, you talk about the gigs, and they come in just to hang out and talk about gigs, and you just sort of this little nerve center that you tend to hear everything and be in touch with everything.
Yeah.
So I really, really like that. But that time I really became a Roland nerd, and we had a lot of synths and different things. And I used to program quite a bit on the old micro sequences. So on the MCs, I've still got an MC50 at home actually from back then, you know, programming in micro step time, which is a fascinating way to spend your time. I highly recommend it. And you should learn SysX while you're at it. That's just as enjoyable. Things that you no longer need, but they were a necessity back then, right? Yeah. So I was uber nerd for this stuff. So there was a module called a JD990, double 2-rack space module, which I loved and always wanted one. And they were about $3,500 at the time. I couldn't afford one. So like a true nerd, I ordered a manual for like $65 from Roland to be sent down so I could read the manual, which was, you know, manuals are much better now than they used to be, right? They were roughly translated back then. They could be a bit dodgy to read. So, I always enjoyed that process. That was just something, And even now, I tend to overcomplicate MIDI rigs and all sorts of things. I just love that process. It's great.
Because you can.
Yeah.
Like I have seen other people try and pick up MIDI, which, man, your story sounds so much like mine. Just, you know, when, you know, the ages that you started playing in bands and and it was a big thing. Like I didn't have the you said a Roland MC50 sequencer.
Yeah.
I was an Atari guy. So I was using Notator.
M40ST. Yes. C-Lab.
Yep. So I'm well aware of how different sequencing is now. Like I see people dragging and dropping loops and they're going, yeah, I'm a producer. And I'm just like,
Yeah, yeah. What's
Yes,
MIDI?
you
Isn't
are.
MIDI that dial that I dial around on the software? Oh
Yeah,
man,
yeah.
it's really
But
yeah.
you understand that stuff, which I find other people are sort of like you mentioned sysx messages, systems exclusive.
Mm,
Yeah, I see some people just go, What's that?" It's just like, man, that's just a
mm,
way for the machines to talk to each other, and program change numbers,
yeah,
control change numbers, all that stuff. So
yeah,
yeah, I think synths
yeah.
technology in general, it's a good way to get started in all that.
It is, yeah, and it's a good understanding. I mean, I'm glad we're not in that era quite so much now, but it's good to have a foundation in it. I mean, it's good to understand how and why it works, and the fact that we're slowly moving to MIDI Mark II now can only be a good thing because it's such a it's such a limited protocol to what it can do, and it's kind of from a bygone era. And Taro Kakahashi, the founder of Roland and boss, he was instrumental in that the origin of MIDI.
Yeah,
Him
right.
and Dave Smith, I think, story. Um, uh, yeah, I've heard this story quite a few times, but basically between him and Dave Smith writing it out on napkins in a cafe in Japan, where they figured all that out and how it was going to work, and they used the DIN plug, which is like the hi-fi DIN plug at the time. That's what the MIDI plug is, even though they use just three
Yep.
pins out of it. So yeah, all of that. So I remember getting I had a Kitty Hawk controller board,
Yep.
the
Yep.
big 10 thing. Yeah. So the guy in at City Music in Launceston where I worked, Darren Hill, he he was extremely knowledgeable. He's a really knowledgeable guy, and I used to just extract information. Not that he cared about telling me in particular, but I would extract this information out of him. And he's extremely knowledgeable. And he imported Kitty Hawk at the time from
Yep.
Germany, and people like Jack Jones that you talked about, that you've spoken about. Jack used to call the store, and so there's all these points of connection for me with him. But because of him, I sort of had an exposure to things like Soldano, which a kid in Launceston normally wouldn't have an education other than in magazines of
Yeah, yeah.
things like Soldano, like more advanced gear. So I had all of that, and he had a rig that had that Kitty Hawk board had just a XLR plug in the side, and I couldn't figure out why he had a mic cable plugged in the side of his controller board. I'm like, why? I don't get why that's like that. Why do we have a MIDI cable? How does that? He's like, that is a MIDI cable. It's only 3 connections, 3 points of connection. That's what your XLR cable is. It's just a more robust version of your MIDI cable. I went, right. See,
Yeah.
you don't go to school to learn all this stuff, right? It's just like
No,
little droplets of things you get over time, over the decades, and if you're lucky. Yeah.
absolutely.
So I got very
It's
lucky there with that.
it's funny. When I first started playing in bands in high school, our keyboard player went on to go to the conservatorium to do music technology, and I stayed in touch with him,
Music
and he was
technology.
and
Yeah.
he was learning to sequence on the Atari using Notator, and I'd watch him doing it. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I need one of these, and
Yeah.
yeah, was getting the vital information. So it's good to have a mentor, isn't it, that can pass on
Oh
all that
yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, one way or the other, you just find this stuff out, and certainly I hope it's not still this way now. But then there was a lot of learn through someone being not so nice to you about something. Like you go to play gigs, and the sound guy would have an attitude, or the lighting guy, or someone else would just bark at you things, and you're going, I got to try and figure out what the answer is from him. His dismissive comment to me. I think I've got to figure, like, your sound's not working. Great. What do I do with that information? So I go and let me figure out what that means. So a lot of that sort of that type of learning. And well, if I meet young people now, I try not to be like that, and I do enjoy the process of teaching or imparting your wisdom, for whatever that is. I think you get like that as you get older. You want to be that guy for somebody young that you didn't have, or something.
Yeah,
You want to.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
how I feel like you are.
I totally relate.
like that.
And when I'm teaching guitar privately, or I'm always trying to impart what I call the shit that matters, because there's a lot of teachers out there that teach stuff that it's like learning algebra or something in high school. It's like, am I really going to need this in the real world? Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's certain things that I didn't learn till much later in life, and I try and get those into students quite young. And just like, yeah,
Yeah.
no one's going to tell you this, but this really matters.
It's gonna matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, even now, like, the overcomplicating things. I did play in a cover band until about a year ago when all of this happened. But even that cover band that we play at, I bring an overly complex rig. I've got everything running to backing tracks, even though it's a live band. We don't have a keyboard player, so I've got keyboards running the backing tracks. But now you can use audio, not just MIDI like we used to be able to do. So all audio backing tracks, but there's MIDI tracks running beside it that change all of my patch changes for my entire rig during the song for me. So I don't have to touch anything. I can drink a beer, I can sing, and I can play, and everything changes around me. So all my patch changes are in the backing parts. They're all just happening. And even for the vocal effects, I've got vocal effects and delays changing at different times during the song and all of that sort of stuff. So and that's, most of it's completely unnecessary. And why do you do it? Because you can. It's the Everest thing, right? Why do you find it? Because it's there, yeah. Yeah, and that's great. And I've looked into trying to automate the lighting as well and DMX stuff. And I just go, oh, man, that's just a whole other thing to go down. I'll probably do it at some point because I can't help myself. But yeah, that's
so
part of the journey, right?
It is, absolutely. And part of the journey is learning to understand MIDI. And you mentioned before that MIDI 2 is in development. That's been in development for a little while. What do you know about it, mate? What is MIDI 2?
I don't have a lot to update you. I mean, other than the fact that it was, I don't know how many NAMM shows ago it was. You remember NAMM shows? They used to be a thing.
Yes.
And
they were a great thing.
And will they come back? We'll see, I guess. But there was, I can't remember when the announcement was. You'd know as much as I would like to do a Google search because I don't know where that's up to. I just know MIDI 2.0 was the big thing and how the protocol is going to be used. But no, I'm not in that updated with that. In fact, just thinking about, I was even thinking a lot about the Boss pedal world when we're talking about coming on here and talking about Boss. I went, man, there's a little bit of me that gets a little bit scared whenever I open my mouth about Boss because there's such a cork sniffing nerdity around pedals. Like you start going, oh yeah, when were they released? Oh, 1977. It's like you're like, there's like a whole 10 comments to go. Oh,
it was 76, you ass.
1977. That's right. December. It was a Wednesday. There's such, and the chipset that was used on that is different to the chipset. And there's all of this. And for a guy who's been at Boss a long time, I've got quite, some of that history, quite a bit of that history over time that I have. But it's only ever from your point of view, right? One man's point of view of history that you see. So I've got a lot more of the last 20 years, of course, than I have before that. But it's interesting because it's most of the people that I know at Boss and at Roland aren't of that ilk, aren't of that cork sniffing ilk. Interestingly, I think that it's an interesting thing to see because they're aware of it and they understand it. But a lot of it happens after the fact, right? So like the Klon guy, right, that says, what was the quote? The ridiculousness that people have made of this is not of my making, not of my doing. Yeah, that thing. It's like, Roland Boss don't set out to make this culture. It happens afterwards. The TR-808 is a classic example of that, meant to be a realistic sounding drum machine. And it kind of was for its day, but then it wasn't. Then it got sold secondhand. Guys bought it. They started making rap music with it. And now it's, or dance music with it. That's a horrible history. I didn't mean that. Please don't correct me. I know there's 100 variations of that particular story, but I'm just whitewashing it all. But it's broad brushstroke stuff. It's that later on it became what it became. It wasn't kind of intended to be a pop dance music classic. It became that later. And I think a lot of that stuff with anything vintage is kind of true. Anything becomes a legacy. The thing that gets built around it is not necessarily what it was intended to be.
Yeah. And
it's an interesting thing to watch, and we have little jokes in the industry. It's like, how to make a pedal successful, discontinue it. That's how you'll sell more.
Sure.
The day that it gets discontinued, you will get phone calls going, well, can I get the old one? It's like, what? We had,
no one wanted it when we made it.
Before, and you didn't necessarily want it, and now it's become cool. Yeah, and that's the insanity of that sort of that type of thinking. I shouldn't say insanity, but it's just the way human beings like to be, like to harken back to the past, and I think a lot of musicians especially are like that. Right? Yeah. And that's how these things get created. the myths that get created around things. Sorry, go.
Josh, I was going to say, Boss is Roland's guitar division, right? Is that it's strictly their guitar products?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
What do you know about the history of Boss? How that came about?
Well, the original pedals. I mean, there was a bunch of pedals before the compact. The traffic lights here, which were the first ones. And that was 77. Again, I'm in dangerous territory here. I'm going to get some dates wrong. I'm going to get corrected. So my apologies in advance. But before that, there's an array of crazy shaped and weirdly named pedals. Kind of. Some of them are pedals. Some of them are just weird looking boxes. Our marketing manager, Mark Smith. I'm naming you. Mark Smith is a Boss pedal collector and a pedal collector of those legacy pedals from beforehand. And I know most. Well, I've actually got to see them and play them only because he's collected them.
Really?
And there's one called a B bar, Boss B. Yes, it's called a B bar. Why? You turn it on and you plug a guitar in, and you'll soon figure out why. There's all these weirdly named pedals, and he's got them all. So before the compact pedal, there's just a bunch of experimentations, and there was in Japan once I saw Mr. Kakahashi. He showed a tuner that he'd made in the shape of a revolver. So now I'm just trying to remember what the presentation. He was always great at making presentations, and because he'd start out and you go, oh yeah, I get where you're going, and then he'd just what do they say about Vernon Reid's solos? Some people go out the door and then they come back in again. Vernon just goes out and leaves. So Mr. Kakahashi used to start this presentation. You go, that's great. Oh, that's awesome. Where is he going with this? And you'd sort of, for a while, you'd be going, oh, he's gone off reservation. Where is he going with this? He's gone, this is a language barrier. He's gone to this tangent. And at the end, genius. He'd bring it back around and make you all laugh and connect the dots. And you just went, that's why you're the guy, right? He was so good at that. But anyway, one of his presentations I saw once in Japan, and it was this revolver. And I think it was each chamber of the revolver was a string that you would tune, right? So it'd be like guitar in there, out here to the amp, and each part of the chamber of the six bullet chamber was a note. And he went through this whole thing, and it was kind of amusing, and again a long presentation. But at the end, it was basically, this was a failure. he said absolute failure. And he looked back up, and again, it's very difficult to look at your failures. But his whole lesson was about this product. But the point is, there's so many of those products that they tried that that just came and went. And to think that Roland's a reasonably big company now, Roland and Boss. But back then it wasn't, and things were just being tried. So people overlay stories on these things, but half the time these guys were just trying stuff. They'd take a couple to NAMM show, they'd buy at the stand at the NAMM show, take a couple there, it worked. Fax back an order to Japan, make some more. Don't. It's over. So those early days are interesting in that. No one ever writes the book How I'm Going to Make $1 Million. They always write the book This is how I made $1 million. So you don't write history forward, right? So a lot of times when they were doing this stuff, they had no idea it was going to be what it became. It's an evolution, and that was pretty obvious when I'm going to lose this now. But there's Maleko, who made some of the analog synth stuff, the modular synth stuff that we did again a few years back. And his story, it's on YouTube, and he goes, I really like to make the original System 100, I think it was, a System 700, System 100. And he went to the Japanese engineers. He said, could I make this again? Thinking it wasn't going to happen. And they went, well, yeah, okay, maybe we'll try it. But what happened was that, in order to get the plans of the original, he's obviously just thinking Roland's a big company, they'll have all this documented. And the fact is, all the guys that made that stuff had since retired, gone, died. I don't know, they weren't there anymore. And they had to call people who'd since retired to go, we tried to make this and it doesn't work. It's, oh no, it's revision 4 that worked. It wasn't that one, So these things back then, they were, you know, they weren't the massive company they were. They were just a bunch of guys trying to make stuff, right?
Yeah,
That
right.
would find a place in the world and find a place in the market. I mean, they obviously did 100 things right, because here we are. And there's some fantastic stories in amongst that. I mean, I'm telling a couple of them badly, but there's some great stories amongst that.
And do you know
Sorry.
what the first successful products for them? Like, do you know what the first successful products for them were? Were they the traffic lights that you just showed us before?
That was that was the start of that form factor of pedal, right? That became what it became. So yes, they were successful, or they wouldn't have continued on like the old ones. They were just trying different sizes and stuff. Like with the original CE1, with the chorus. It's a massive pedal. It's a big grey metal thing, you know, and that was the chorus that was from the Jazz Chorus amplifiers, right? So that was that in a pedal, but it wasn't. I mean, it's a massive pedal, and it's plugs into mains, and it's huge. So it's in no way a compact pedal. But then, yeah, as that form factor became the way to move forward, then that's everything got squeezed into that box. And it was, I've actually met one of the engineers once at NAMM, and we, you know, sometimes have dinner after NAMM, and we'd sit there and talk about stuff and nerd out about things. And his particular job, I can't remember his name right now, which is terrible of me, but his particular job was, no matter what the pedal was, it had to fit back into this shaped box, right? So they developed technology outside of what they were going to do. Say, I think the example we were talking about at the time was the first, maybe RC3, or one of the single compact loop station sizes, because the original loop station was a twin pedal, the RC20. But his job was to fit it all in. So they make the pedal, here's what it'll look like. Right, now you got to fit it into the box. And the layers, and he described how he did the layers of the circuitry, or like tried to fit it in various ways, and eventually it's squeezed in the box. So certainly that form factor has been extraordinarily successful.
Uh-huh.
You know, so and it's, you know, we've certainly gone through the times of being cool and then not as cool and then cool again. I think we're definitely on this one again right now. You know, it's been an interesting thing to watch.
What do you know? What Boss's biggest selling pedal has been over the years?
Well, I should know. Let me think what that would be. It's probably just the DS1. It's usually DS1. So I have to see how many have sold right now to test me. There might be some people watching that know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that right now. I think it's the DS1.
Yeah.
But you know, the big hitters on the pedal world are DS1, TU3 or TU2 or TU. It's always been a tuner. You know, compressors, so the CS range, ODs, of course. There's an OD here. You know, various incarnations of OD. And then you probably get to more choruses, phases, flanges, right? So chorus is a huge one. I ran into someone the other day who said they didn't like chorus, and their only reason, I know this is a travesty to you, and I understand this, and his only reason was that it was too 80s sounding. So the exact reason why we would like it was the reason he didn't like it. And do you know what I found? Is that people who were born about, I reckon, anywhere 5 years younger than us, who had grunge as their major thing, right, instead of the pointy-headed guitars that we had, the chorus is like relegated to this 80s sound, yet they do like phases and flanges, because that was still cool.
Yeah, right.
So there's like a modulation snobbery, which I'm not okay with. Come on,
man, I love that. Love the 80s chorus. I've got an 80A MP1 just behind me there in a rack.
Oh yes,
backwards.
Nice.
Man, the thickness of that is just amazing.
Yeah.
You just can't
So
beat.
No, sorry, go.
You can't beat an analog chorus. Now, I've got various digital devices, which is trying to cram everything into one box, and they're really convenient to have if you're doing a gig and you need a sound and you need a phaser or a flanger and you don't have one on your board to have it.
Yeah.
But when you A/B them to a real analog pedal, especially those modulation effects, it's just missing this richness.
Yeah.
Have you experienced the same thing?
Yeah, look, it's all different flavors, right? And it's I like analog choruses for certain things, but I do like a big lush digital chorus as well. It just depends. But there's different, like there's so many different flavors in that, right? Because there's the digital chorus that's ridiculously digital pitch shifting, right? Like the Eventide style thing, right? That is so obviously digital, but there's such a cool thing to that, right? That's way on that spectrum. And then there's the analog thing, like the CE2W, which is the Wazacraft one now that does, that's analog, and that simulates the CE1, CE2, and it's just that perfect, CE1 type analog chorus that Echo Beach type, like all those sort of things, and police and stuff. So that's on that end. But in between, you've got all these things that are kind of a bit of both, and there's some really great stuff in there as well. So it's so hard with an effect like that to pigeonhole it, because you can get, often the more things in one box type stuff, the multi effects, you do compromise on a level of purity, right? Again, that's something that you can really notice, especially at a high volume or through studio monitors, right? That's where you're really going to notice that. But most, like you said, for convenience for live, multi-effects that can just go click, bang, the signal chains completely change is a great thing to have.
Now,
but sorry, go.
Sorry, mate, I'm cutting you off there. Did you have more to say on those?
I'll always have more to say. Please cut me off so you can keep talking. Talk.
I was going to bring up that you mentioned the Roland JC 120 amplifier and how that the did you say CE1 was the chorus taken out of that? Yep.
Yeah.
Man, that's still a popular amplifier, isn't it? Like, do you guys still make and sell that?
It's still the same. Yeah. There's 3 different models now. I mean, there've been a plethora of models over the years. I'm sure you've seen them. The old heads and all sorts of stuff. I remember being in retail and zany versions of the JC would come through at different times that you'd never seen and gone, they made that? Really? Like that's a JC? There's all sorts of weird and wonderful incarnations of the JC over the years. But the JC, as it is now, has pretty much been the same thing since it started. And there's not too many things that are like that, right? Especially it's a solid state amp. How many solid state guitar amps have been a classic thing and still in demand constantly for decades and are the same product made the same way, same components and all that stuff. So yeah, the JC120 is still around, and now the JC40 is a smaller version of that. JC40 is kind of cool because you've got what's manageable. The JC120 is mammoth, and it's got the stereo ins at the front, which you can go in through the preamp, or it's got stereo returns at the back, so you could use it if you're running a multi-effects or some sort of stereo effects. You can just use it as a power amp, small, like an on-stage stereo power amp like that. But and with the JC40, that's got a usable distortion. It's arguable that the JC120's distortion is usable.
The fact that I've never heard it, I've never actually heard anybody turn on the distortion on that.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's one of those things. It's like, it's like, well, it's just there and it's what it is. And then after a while, someone uses it or it becomes a sought after thing. It's one of those, we have a bunch of those. That's how we end up with a record scratch effect and things. The thing we tried to get rid of for years, and it becomes a plug-in that people want to use. Didn't we? That's so the distortion, but the distortion on the JC40 and the small JC22, that's the smaller one, is plenty usable. Yeah, so that's something that's certainly been improved.
Now, there's a friend of mine, when I put on the on my user group that I was having you on, he said to ask you about a particular Roland amp, and I thought that autocorrect got. What was it?
No, I know what he meant. The Bolt 60, wasn't it?
Yeah, I thought maybe autocorrect had changed the Cube 60 or something to the Bolt. What the hell is a Bolt?
Oh, mate, that is well before my time. But the Bolt 60, actually, you bring it up. Bolt 60.
Bolt 60, okay.
Roland Bolt 60. God.
I think
it was Bolt 60. Let me just check if that's right. Yeah, Bolt 60. That's it. That's the one.
Hang on one sec. I got to remember. I got to hit that button first. Here we go. Now I can.
And you're looking like early 80s for that. I don't. Yeah, that's not in my head.
And what was it? Bolt 60.
Bolt 60. God, there's so many So many interesting little things.
Roland Bolt 60, the gear page. I'm just going to look at images.
I got a feeling that I actually almost bought one of those when I was, sort of 13 or something, which they would have been current at the time. And something happened. I think a store had sold it. I had it on lay-by and they sold it or something on me as a kid. What a horrible
Okay.
thing to do. What a horrible thing.
Yeah, just looking at that. That's got a whole bunch of switches and things. Let me just bring up that bit bigger. It's gone to a reverb page. Can I get that any bigger?
Bolt. Man,
there's a whole bunch of inputs and outputs on the front. Okay, so I can see there's a send and return, overdrive, reverb, headphone. So there must be foot switchable on-offs. High gain, low gain inputs. Okay, Bolt 60. I've never heard of that.
Bolt. With the original cubes and stuff too, during the sort of 2000s, the cubes were re-released. I mean, Roland cubes were a big thing in the 80s. They were cube shaped, and they were bass cube, keyboard cube, guitar cube. There were a bunch of different cubes, and they were different colors. They've got a whole sort of cult following around them now. But in the 2000s, we released Roland cubes as a guitar amp. And they were cube-ish, but they weren't quite the same size. But what was amazing is not being around in that original time of cubes and being around when we released those cubes was the brand equity that that name had, Roland Cube. People came out of the woodwork telling their stories about Roland Cubes. It was amazing. Really, this is and it pushed that forward. I mean, katanas now rule the world, which we can get into a moment. But certainly cubes for us were a rip-roaring success for years. Bass cubes, guitar cubes, and they were a massive thing. But they were kind of not really, other than being an amplifier, they weren't really a lot like the ones from 20 years earlier. But wow, that name is really strong, the Roland Cube thing. So the Bolt, not so much. We didn't release another Bolt, but certainly cubes are massive.
Well, I got to say, my first experience of playing through amplifiers was playing through the school's Roland keyboard cube 60, the silver one.
Oh yeah, there you go.
And they had a bass cube 60 as well, and I didn't know any different. In fact, the only other amp that I'd played through, they also had a Fender Rhodes, which had an input on there, and I could play through that and get a bit of tremolo happening. And it was a while before I actually got my own amplifier. So I was playing through the school's Roland Cube 60 keyboard amp.
Yeah. And then
it was a cool sound.
Well, they have quite a following. I think, especially the bass cube and the bass cube, especially, I think was something that people still use. There's a real thing around that. But people tend to. It's funny to watch from the sort of, I guess, from the inside out a little bit, as you sort of get behind the curtain a little bit with working with someone like Roland, that you see that from a different point of view. It's really interesting to watch now, because people will buy something and, well, there's not a software interface for it. Maybe there wasn't back 20 years ago, and they'll spend their life writing an interface for that thing, and they'll invest so much time in it, and they end up dedicating a good portion of their life to this one thing. And we may move on, that may be discontinued, and the world moves on, and this person becomes, or this group becomes, like a sought after oracle about this instrument, and eventually they know more about it than we do. It's fascinating to watch how those things drop into culture and people grab them and make something of them. Again, it's like they make something that's beyond what its original thing was for. And sometimes it's not always like that a piece of gear lands that is obvious who the person is that's going to be the customer for that. It's going to be the person that grabs hold of it. And sometimes there are great surprises. We might have an idea of what that person looks like, and then it's not. It might just be someone else, some other group gravitates towards this for a reason that it might not have been made for at all. There's some fascinating things like that happen. So it's kind of funny to watch that, because sure, the engineers have that have no end of fun with that, because they put this thing out into the world, and it has a life of its own. It's really interesting to watch.
Cool. I was just thinking, when I said I was playing through the Roland keyboard amp, my first pedal was the Boss HM2 heavy metal pedal.
Ooh,
And that's what I
yes.
used to play through that amp. And that was, I had my clean sound, just the amp, and then was using the HM2. And I just saw that somebody dropped in the comments there the comment of Metal Zone. So, what is with the whole Metal Zone thing at the moment? Everyone wants to talk Metal Zone pedals. Again, that's something you guys left behind a while back, huh? And it's just come out of the woodwork.
No, Metal Zone has always been a really good selling pedal. Like
Yeah.
it's one of the top selling. Like you wouldn't have a guitar store and not have a Metal Zone. It's like having a guitar store and not having DS1 or or Tube Screamer or anyone's stuff that's like the staple diet of musicians.
Yep.
Metal Zone has been that and continues to be that. And then the MT2Ws that did the Wazacraft version. So that the whole Wazacraft thing, and heavy metal pedal, right? That's coming. So it's interesting, the Wazacraft thing too. So we talked about that the other day.
I was just about to say, can you tell us what is the Wazacraft thing all about?
So Waza is a Japanese term for art, craft, the best of what they can make. Sort of that's how it ends up being translated to a product. So they're made in Japan, like the original Boss pedals, and they're improved everything, improved buffers, improved components. Like they're made with a certain type of care, but also often, so the distortion pedals, for instance, have like a standard mode and a custom mode, and there'll often be a discrete circuit, like a separate circuit that it switches to. You sort of got like two pedals in one. So often, you might get a bit more gain or a bit of a different EQ curve, just a slightly different pedal setting. So they've taken, often, it might be guys used to take those to get modded by different people, like they'd end up with switches and different things on them anyway, trying those sort of things. So for the Boss guys, it was like, well, this is what we do. This is our pedals, right? So the Wazacraft thing is, and there's quite a few pedals in that range now, and my favorite being the DC2W. We need to talk about the DC2W, the world's best chorus pedal, but that's chorus again. But they're just sort of superior, I guess, in the way that when the boutique pedal thing was coming out, right? Boutique pedals became a term for anybody. They could make 3 a year in their garage and spray paint them, but they were boutique, right? That became silly there for a while, right? Like it was just, boutique was just slapped on anything that they wanted to be cool about. And Boss sort of stood firm during that time. Went, actually, no, we this is what we do. We do really great sounding pedals. Yep. They look like this, they sound like this, and they do the job, man. And they test them to be stomped on. They don't, generally speaking, they don't break down. Be very careful. Yep, comments again. But for the most part, they're extraordinarily reliable, and that's the way they're made. So when this whole boutique madness was taking over the world, it was interesting to observe how it was treated and how Boss saw that. Eventually, I guess you could say the answer to that was not only Wazacraft but other dimensions of pedals. So we've got the 500 series, we've got the 200 series, right? They're different shapes. They're not a classic Boss pedal shape. It started with the twin pedal series, right? That was the first thing, twin pedals. And that was, I can't remember what the first twin pedal was. I'd have to think back, scanning the archives. But twin pedals became a form factor of their own. So there was the Overdrive, there was the RC20. So most famous twin pedal would be the RC20, the start of the loop station revolution. Roland started that. And again, not knowing just how big it would become. Loop station became a term like Hoover for vacuum cleaners, so it just became, everyone releases a loop station no matter what brand it is, because now it's just such a huge term and a huge thing that's sort of taken things over. So that form factor became a standard form factor, that twin pedal form factor. And there was even GK pedals that would take the GK input, which is the guitar synth pickup, right? Yep. So the GK pickup, and it would take that. So there was a plethora of twin pedals over the years, but that has now morphed into the 200 series and the 500 series. So I guess that's Boss's answer to the boutique revolution as such, and how that was going, because it's pretty obvious that quality was fairly mixed as far as boutique, what was considered boutique, and Boss has never had that. It's always been, this is all good quality, like the sound of it or not, that's fine. That's up to everybody's individual taste, but it will be exactly as it's meant to be, and it'll be reliable and it'll sound the right way.
Cool.
So it's a interesting thing. But that loop station thing, I was doing product demos. So when I started at Roland, do you mind me doing this? I don't know. Do you have other questions? I'm just going off.
Just keep talking, man. You just keep talking.
Sorry, right. God, stream of consciousness. I did write in my Facebook post. I didn't know if you were getting what you're getting yourself into. Talking.
Man, we're just here to chit chat away. I'm just going to take the moment to say, if anybody wants to leave some questions for you, they've got a couple there. Yeah. But I'm aware they're there. I'll come back to them later. I like to just have a chat first and not be distracted by going through those. So, Super Troll NATO, I see you. Michael Anderson, I see you.
Right.
We're going to keep talking. I'll come back to your questions in a bit. So please, if you have anything, leave them in the chat there. Over to you, Josh.
The stream of consciousness continues. Right. So back when I started at Roland, so this is a long time ago, in '98, and I was starting in sort of internal sales, punching orders, little headset mic on, all that stuff. But the nerd in me wanted to get more into product, and so I was probably never going to last there for long. And a good mate of mine, Axel, Mark Allen, who used to be in product there, he was in tech support. And that to me was like a dream role. That sounded awesome. It's like, man, you get to just talk about gear all day to other people who want to talk about gear all day. Gee, was I wrong? But that's just kind of what it ended up. Wow. But it was cool. So I remember that him coming over to talk to the internal sales guy and go, oh, look, if you've got any questions, you need to ask the boys and blah, blah, blah. And they sort of said, well, Josh has been telling us some stuff. And I went, oh, wow, okay, that's cool. Someone else has said that rather than me. Go, excuse me, mister, can I be that guy? And he was going to do some traveling or something. Anyway, I ended up landing that gig, the tech support gig. And I probably did that for maybe a couple of years. And that was on everything. That was on everything we did, right? Every Roland and Boss product that was currently available and legacy products. That phone call would be that, and multiple of them a day. So, but like any job, you get used to the same questions coming up a lot, so you could answer those sort of things. So that was fun. And then one day I just started I play guitar a little bit around the office or whatever, but I would always ask to try things. I was always like knock on the door and go, you mind if I try a guitar demo? And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, I think I can do that.
Yep.
And Roland was a bit smaller then. There's probably a lot more people there now, I guess, but it was you could just try things. I think you can try things in any company. I think you just go and knock on the door and go, do you think I can do this?
Yeah.
You're not necessarily holding your hand out. You're just going, I want to give that a go.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing these along with Mark Smith, who's the marketing guy at Roland. We designed these demonstrations, and I thought, I think I can do this. I think I can talk, and and obviously I can talk. I think I can talk and do this in front of people, and I can explain the gear. I think I can do that. And I remember the first one we did, it was 6 people came along, and it was Allen's in the city or something, I think. So it must have been 99 or something, whatever it was. And I was like, right, so should we do that again or just scrap the idea because nobody came? But what it was back then with guitar clinics and workshops, clinics, whatever you want to call them, was that, and you would have seen this back then, guitar clinics became a bit ridiculous to me. They were either a guy that could play ridiculously well and he's trying to sell his shredding CD in the lobby on the way out, but couldn't really say anything and certainly couldn't explain the technology of the gear that was sitting behind him.
Yep. So
you had that, the Shreddy McShreddy type clinic, and that was mostly I would say the company's fault, because the company would often just go, I'll hire a guitar player and give him a product and give him a date and say, see you there. And whatever fell out of his mouth or didn't, just did, right? That's what happened. So I saw quite a few of those, and I'm sure you did too. It's like, man, I'd love to know what you're playing through, but you just shredding. It doesn't really matter, right? It's kind of irrelevant.
Absolutely.
Just doing your thing.
Yep.
So, and the other type was the cult of personality, the celebrity like Tommy Emmanuel releasing 6 new Matins. It's like there's 400 people turn up to this. I don't think it's for the 6 new Matins. Maybe I'm wrong, but it like that, and those sort of shows would work. I mean, I'm sure they worked for Maton many times, and he's he's an incredible artist. But that was the other style of clinic. So where I thought we could fit in, where Mark Smith thought we could fit in as well, was like, we don't make it about me because I'm nobody, and we can make it about the gear, and we can make it about a concept of the gear. So we used to do things like join the guitar revolution, or it's all about tone, or these concepts of what you can come along to see. So I do guitar synth. I used to have a little formula of what I do. I do like a multi-effects, a guitar synth, then maybe another multi-effects, then a loop station, and then end on some playing thing. They go for about an hour or so, and most of it was talking and some playing, and the camera over your shoulder and a screen up behind you, and and talking through stuff, headset mic on, and talking through the products, but trying to do it like you should see a good demonstration in store, which is a bit of playing, a bit of talking about what you're about to hear and the application of it, a bit more playing, and that sort of thing, and try and make them more interesting to watch, and more about the person that was coming along to see it rather than the person standing up there. That's the customer focused sort of attitude. So that grew, and over a couple of years, we got very good at that. And I say we because he would market it, and I would stand up and do my dancing monkey routine, and together that became a thing. And we would regularly get 120 people along to these clinics, and over that time, I got better at speaking in front of a crowd, and now I try and impart that to people. It's a bit of a bygone era, that particular skill, but that skill of being able to speak in, it's like content for YouTube, or speaking to a camera, speaking to a person, speaking to a crowd. It's all building rapport with something that's in front of you, right? It's all of that process. And so over the time we got really good at that, and then I started doing some other things, and we got other guitar guys in, and we've had a few other guitar people since. So and then maybe around, and I used to do these medleys, which is pretty much what's up on YouTube of me, is medleys of doing things. Because I found that medleys, playing through 15 different songs in 5 minutes sort of thing, and stepping through the sounds, was what I wanted to hear. I don't know about you, but you would have been the same, I'm sure. You wanted to have, if someone could have sold you a thing that had a button that said Eddie Van Halen on it, and you can press it, and in your head, that was you would have bought that every day of the week, right? Absolutely. That would have been on your list, right?
Yep.
So that was my logic for that. It was like, and if I can give them just a little bit of that, I mean, you're not going to be able to play like Eddie. You're not going to be able to play like Brian May. You're not going to be able to play like Dave Gilmour. But if the tone's there, and in your headphones, you can play a bit of that lick, and you can hear yourself, and you've gone, I'm a rock star. That's enough for almost everybody, right? Like, that's a big deal. And if we could have had that instead of whatever scratchy little box we had running through, and we still thought we were rock stars, right? So for me, I found that was pushing emotional hot buttons, right? Because it still does it for me. That's why I still like that process. And I would program them in sort of chronological order. So oldest to most current. We run out of guitar heroes as you get most current. Have you noticed that? It's really difficult.
Yeah, funny about that.
Right? So I'd start with something like, like the Shadows to Hendrix, Zeppelin, blah, blah. Where else would I go? Yeah, Dave Gilmour would be in there. Eddie would be in there sometimes. If I could pick a solo I could play properly. Still questionable. But, like lots of different, those big hitters, and end with something like, I don't know, back in the 2000s, probably Limp Bizkit, and the last ones, I don't know what I did. What did I do? Linkin Park or something, I think. But yeah, just trying to get those. And the more accurate I could get the backing tracks, the more it sounded more like the tone. If you surround it with the right ecosystem, it sounded more like the tone. So so around maybe 2010, I did that GT100 one, which is the oldest one that I have on YouTube. I think it's around 2012, maybe something like that. And that's on YouTube. And that was filmed at a dealer meeting. We had a bunch of retailers come in to see us play, release new gear, and talk about the new stuff that we had coming out. And that went kind of boom. So I don't know what that's up to now, 300,000 or 400,000 views, something, whatever. That just got some attention, which is was a bit surprising, actually. It was interesting because I'd long since stopped doing clinics and workshops. It's it's kind of thing of the past because people started to not turn up in droves when
Yeah,
the
right.
internet, when they could get what they wanted, right?
Yep.
So that sort of morphed.
Yep.
And and then I think maybe a year later or 2 years later, I ended up at NAMM doing the release for ME80 at the invitation from the Roland US guys, Boss US, which was really nice. So went over and got to work. I've been to a bunch of NAMM shows, but got to work at the NAMM show, see it from the other side, which was great. It was great fun. But it was doing the same 5-minute demo hundreds of times, just over and over and over. But you get on the front page of the Guitar World website, and then you're seeing yourself on all these things, which is for me the equivalent of seeing myself on the front of a magazine because it's
cool.
It was
Cool.
pretty amazing. Yeah, so that was fun. And then and then I just did a few more of those sort of things. The last one I did was GT1. I don't know what NAMM show that was, maybe 3 years ago or something. So those things I became a little bit known for, if I'm known for anything. And I'd start writing the blog articles about tone design, about how to get those tones. And I did some sort of 3-minute videos for Guitar Gods and Masterpieces, the TV show that was out for a while. Dave Loader, who does a great job, by the way. Dave, shout out to Dave. What a hardworking human being. And I did these 3-minute tone segments, which were just like, what can you do in 3 minutes? But I'd just try and turn a bunch of effects off and turn them on and go, this is what I use, this is what I use, this is what I use, and try and do that. And even then, YouTube has a lovely way of abusing you in the comments for trying to mislead people, but that's hard. Yeah. But that's the thing I like to do now.
So what's been your favorite bit of gear to demo of Boss or Roland?
Ooh.
Is there something that instantly brings a wow factor that, you can press a couple of buttons and people just go, whoa?
That's always been guitar synths. Always. Guitar synth technology, because it's an oft misunderstood technology. Right? So, and if you ever played one that's set up not the right way, you play a note and you wait for a minute for the note to come out the other end and you go, well, that's rubbish. And the fact is that's just a setup issue and some tweaking that needs to go on because they're not like that. So we would often sell the most amount of guitar synths where we did a guitar clinic. It would follow because you demonstrate it properly. So this is how it works and this is how you'll have to play. And that technology has just come a long way. Oh, V-Guitar, right? So V-Guitar, 95, that technology.
I was going to bring up V-Guitar. That pretty much what Line 6 started touting as their virtual guitar stuff many years later. You guys were already doing that.
Many years later.
Yeah.
Many years later.
Yeah, I do remember working for Gary Barr and having that technology come through the shop and just going, whoa, check this out. You can alternate tunings and all that kind of stuff.
So the same pickup works with both, right? So you got like that the Hex Pickup, which is like, I mean, that GK pickup in its various forms over the last, I don't know how many years it's been out, 25 years, whatever it is, longer. That pickup is basically 6 individual humbucker pickups, mini humbuckers.
Okay.
They sit, and that sits between the bridge pickup and the bridge, and it sits under there, and it basically turns each string into its own monophonic instrument. Oh, that's basically what it does. But it just picks it up. So it picks it up like a normal pickup and feeds it down the 13-pin cable. There's no processing as such done in that pickup. Often people call it a MIDI pickup, and it's actually not. The MIDI happens at the other end in the module, right? It's just it just picks up the 6 strings, feeds it individually to the module, and whatever the module does with it, like V-Guitar, same pickup. So, and they're completely different technologies, right? So anything, it used to be GRs were guitar synths and VGs were virtual guitar. Yep. And now there's mixtures of that, but
they're interchangeable now.
Back then, well, not really, but the GR55, which is still a current product, a few years old now, that mashed them both together. So you used to have to buy a guitar synth and a VG guitar, virtual guitar system. So GRs would be MIDI conversion, right? So play a note, converts to a MIDI note, gives it a gate time, a velocity, and a pitch, so that's all the GRs would do. So not all they would do, that's what they would do. But the biggest problem I found with guitar synths was guys would play it like a guitar. Like, well, that's what doesn't sound right. You don't go on a piano and go, like play it like a guitar. You can't do that. You can't slap it like you're playing it with ham-fisted. It doesn't work like that. And guitarists are notoriously sloppy. False harmonics, muting, lots of stuff like that isn't a note popping out of the damn thing, right? So the GR, poor little GR, would try and convert that all into notes if people played it like that. And people would come back going, this thing doesn't work. It's like, it's working perfectly. You're not playing right.
Yeah, right.
You're going to play like a piano, do that, because you do that. You don't, like, that's a glissando strumming. Play like a piano player plays. So, horses for courses. You got to play the instrument to how it works. So that was interesting. And set up the damn pickup properly. If you don't set that up properly and set up the levels for each of the strings, you're going to have a lumpy experience. You got to spend that time, like playing guitar. No one picks up guitar for a wall and goes, "That's awesome." If you do, it's a happy accident most of the time, right? Like, you go, "I need this set up for it to be a well-oiled machine and work exactly how I need it to work." And that guitar synth stuff was no different. But then, the virtual guitar stuff, I think it's 95, virtual guitar testing, stretching the grey matter. I think it's 95. That came, and that used the same technology, but instead of converting it to anything as such, it would manipulate the waveform of the string, right? So it would so that's why people used to talk, "Oh, there's latency." It's like, well, it's not really, it's not converting to anything other than there's some pitch shifting and different things going on, but there's no conversion as such. It just manipulates it on the way through. That's why you can play muted, notes, slap the strings, play harmonics, do any of that stuff with virtual guitar, because it's completely using the same pickup, but a completely different technology to MIDI conversion.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that's how it can do. But it still can do some really cute things, with detuning your guitar and everything, and while maintaining your guitar at concert pitch, because you buy that set of strings because it feels a certain way under your fingers. The truss rod likes it at that tension. All those things, right? That's how it should feel when you play it. Then you can press a button, you get open G. If you had to do that in real life, you go, grrr, grrr, grrr. That one's flapping around the breeze. That one's about to snap. That one, the truss rod's having a hard time. Don't leave it like that for too long. Whereas this is all overcome with one button in V guitar.
That is an interesting technology, and I did have the Line 6 Variax for a little bit. Now, one thing that I wasn't anticipating was when I'm playing loud with the boys, I always wear earplugs. You actually hear through your bones quite well. Like, I always laugh that when I'm playing, I could be playing the loudest fucking gig ever, cranked out 100-watt Marshall, and I change my pickup selector, and I can hear that click, clear as a bell through the bone conductivity. So what I found with the Line 6, I was playing in a grunge tribute band at the time, and I had to do all these different tunings and stuff. I went, "You beauty!" I just have them use guitar, and then I'd go to drop D. I'd be playing the song, and I'd look at everyone going, "I'm so sorry that I'm playing the wrong notes there," and they're going, "What do you mean? It sounded fine." No, I could feel the dissonance, because normally I'm playing drop D, but I'm not tuned to drop D, and I was feeling that dissonance in the fingers going. It's like I'm playing. It's
like a dubbed movie, right? It's like a badly dubbed movie. You're looking at it, but it doesn't sound like that. Why doesn't it sound like it does? It can be the same feeling. Yeah, it's an odd thing, and it's that convenience to purity thing again, right? It's if you want that convenience. And the guitar player, I won't use his name because I'm not sure if he'd be okay with using his name, but he was touring with Joni Mitchell. This is, I don't know how long ago. Things start to blur, and I start saying it was 15 years ago. It might not have been. It might have been. No, probably about that. It might have been 10. I don't know. Anyway, so he was touring with Joni Mitchell, and his dilemma was that Joni Mitchell uses a plethora of tunings, right? Almost a different open tuning for a different song, almost, right? So he had a couple of choices. He could have a guitar tech, 5 acoustic guitars, and a guitar tech constantly retuning them, hoping to God that when he handed it to him, it was the right tuning for that next song. And this just would happen all night. And he went, "I'm just visualizing how that will happen," and it won't. It would just be a train wreck. So and so I think a guy in a guitar store, I think it was Jeffrey Jardine. Shout out to Jeff Jardine. I think he had spoken to him and said, "Have you considered this? Using a GK pickup on your acoustic guitar, because it'll work on any steel string, acoustic or electric. Put a GK on your acoustic guitar, and then bring up an acoustic sound, tune the acoustic sound in the V guitar, so you're not actually using the guitar, and just program different tunings for each song." And he's like, "Wow, will that work?" And he called me, and I came into the store, and we sat down. He had a big scrapbook full of the songs and the tunings.
Yep.
And he just said, "What do we do?" I said, "Give me the name of the song, and I'll make that the patch name, and give me the tuning, and I'll adjust the tuning. Then we'll work on an acoustic guitar. Or maybe we worked on the acoustic guitar sound first to make sure that was how I liked, and we ran some monitors." And he goes, "Yep, that sounds great," or sounds roughly like his acoustic guitar, or the same. And then we just worked his way through, and he had 24 patches of the various tunings, and he walked away happy as Larry. So that's when it matters, right? That's when you couldn't do it with anything else, because it's like the illusion is complete. He's playing an acoustic guitar, but he would have a major dissonance for that, because it's an acoustic guitar, right? It's coming straight back at you.
I was going to say, is he using like a solid body acoustic so that it wasn't producing much loudness in itself?
No, it was hollow body acoustic. It was his,
really?
I can't remember what it was now, actually. I don't even know what brand it was, but I said to him at the time, I said, "Man, you're going to have that loud, or either in-ears or loud monitors, to get over what you're going to be feeling and hearing from here, because it's going to be a little bit weird." It's 100 times better than your other solution, though.
Yeah.
5 guitars and a rotating tuning nightmare. Forget it.
And you'd probably have to have a backup for each of those tunings too. Hey, I'll just tune this, and here's a backup in case you break a string.
Boing. Yeah, that's right. And it's all over. That's pretty fun.
Josh, when we were talking earlier about boutique pedals and the Wazacraft and everything, now a big catchphrase that popped its head up, a few years back was true bypass. And so a lot of Boss pedals do not have a true bypass, but actually have a buffer. And I just want to hear your take on the fors and againsts of using the buffer, because I hear that the buffer in Boss pedals is actually pretty bloody good.
It is very bloody good. There's some variation of buffers, like with the Wazacraft. There's slightly superior buffers, but the buffering, and next time I'll bring a chart. I've got a chart. I'm sure it's on the internet somewhere, but there's a chart of what goes in and what comes out, and the readings of that, right? And true bypass is awesome in its place, right? That's why some of the pedals have that option now. Some pedals that the Boss do now do have that, but it's only when it's useful, right? Like it's like anything. There's not true bypass by itself. Doesn't mean it's an abstract term. It's like, does it have true bypass? No, but what do you need true bypass for? What are you running that requires that to be a thing? Because if you don't, you're just asking for signal loss. So I think it's horses for courses. Pete Thorne did a great video on it a while back. I mean, I've had to have this discussion many, many times over the years, and with some people who just who have it in their head as a thing, there's just no point. You just got to walk away from the insanity of the argument, because it's not reasonable. It doesn't follow. So I'm using this, therefore it needs true bypass. That makes sense. That's cool. You got a fuzz pedal that doesn't like a buffer in the front. Great many of them don't. That's cool. Well, then don't run a pedal before it. It's gonna sound rubbish. Or it's not just that doesn't sound right. Doesn't sound rubbish. It just doesn't sound right. And so there are some pedals that aren't happy with a buffer. Most of them on the planet are, and they'll benefit of it, right? Like, so you're going to have, if you got the opportunity, I would say to any guitarist, if you have the opportunity to play through a pedal where you have a buffer on and off switch, or a true bypass on and off switch, same thing. If you have that option, you should run 25 foot of cable to the pedal and another 25 foot of cable after that pedal to the amp. And you should run that pedal off and turn the bypass on and off, and listen to the magnificent difference in the tone, and then compare it to a 10-foot cable plugged straight into the amp from the guitar, right? And you'll find the thing, as you would know, the thing that is closest to that 10-foot cable is the buffer being on. Yeah, and when you turn the buffer off, you'll lose a bunch of top end and all that. But truly, I've had a few things over the years where I've had that luxury of doing that. Not everyone has that. So I guess I get when you read about these things, how the nerd factor can be higher for true bypass, if you want to read it that way. I completely get that. But the fact is, if you sit down and you get the chance to experiment with that, it's night and day, right? It's not even like, ooh, is that kind of different? It's like turning a light on and off, right? It's like having a light on dim and then having a light as bright as the sun. It's not quite that, but it certainly is not open to interpretation when you try it. It's very obvious.
Yeah.
So that's where I stand on it. Do it when you need to, don't when you don't.
Yep.
because you'll just lose a bunch of stuff that you want.
You know, that is one of the dangers with the internet, is there's a lot of people talking like they know when they don't. You know, I see people on Facebook groups or forums where people are asking advice, and then the people you might know that's offering them advice, you're thinking, man, I know you've never played what they're asking about. You're just passing on something else that you've heard. You don't know that. And I think that's the danger. And that could have been why the whole true bypass thing became such a buzzword for a while. I think people just didn't understand that it's actually your friend.
No, and I think it's actually your
friend.
Well,
buffers are your friend.
Yeah. Are your friend, yeah. And it's I think when you're in when you tend to be an amateur at something, and I don't mean that condescendingly in any way. I mean when you're beginning your journey, you want to know this stuff, and you become, or if you like us, you become verbal about it. You want to know, and you want to ask questions, and you want answers, and you want that to make sense, and blah, blah, blah. And as you get to know, you become less noisy about it, because you know it doesn't matter, and you know this will work that way, and this will work that way, and you don't worry about it. So I often think that the loudest voices online tend to be amateurs, because they want to know the damn answer. And when they've got it, or they think they've grabbed hold of it, they want to defend it to the hilt.
Yeah.
And it becomes a piece of information that they defend that they've never really had to use in real life, right? Like we've played loud gigs. I mean, I love playing loud gigs. I know you're the same. I love it loud. And Eddie Van Halen, volume is tone, right? No truer word ever spoken, because everything changes with volume, right? Everything.
It does.
You know, valve amp, different components change. Your perception of EQ changes. Everything changes. Your trouser legs flap in the breeze. Everything changes, right? And that's the same with effects, with buffering, with all that stuff. I run a stereo rig like you do, ridiculously overcomplicated stereo rig, which I love, and I'm adding more things to it all the time, which I love. And how good is that to still have that in your head, though? I love that we have that. I think that's a gift. But I ran the stereo rig, and I ran the Eventide pitch factor, right? So trying to get the micro pitch, you know,
the
H3000 Eventide micro pitch patch. And I love Eventide stuff. Great stuff. So I plugged the pitch factor through, and so preamp straight into that, out of that into the stereo power amp, and the 2 quad boxes, right? So it's smashing. My American friends laugh at the term quad boxes.
Yes.
4 by 12, right? Yeah, it's not a thing. Right?
I found this out recently when I went to Germany, that Australians are the only ones that say quad boxes. So I try and avoid that on my YouTube channel. It's a 4 by 12.
Sound makes them laugh.
Yeah.
So 2 quad boxes. So 2 quad boxes. And I played it and I went, that's great. That's the sound. That sounds fantastic. Yep. Bit of micro pitch shifting. Great. Okay. But like any micro pitch shifting, sucks the mid range a bit, changes the tone a bit. I'm like, it's just that, a bit of comb filtering or, whatever it is, the modulation that does that. All right. And I had my DC2W, back to the DC2W. So Wazacraft, Dimension, right? So beautiful pedal, Dimension C. So if you've ever seen, the original Dimension, or is it? Let me get this exactly right because it's important. Right, there we go. Okay. Let's bring up a picture so I can get this exactly right. There it is. Nice one. So in the DC2W, right, so you got stereo in, stereo out. Yep. And you've got, on that particular Wazacraft pedal, the standard mode on the left, but the other mode that it's got is the STD 320. Now, STD 220 was the big rack mount version of this, right? Still only 4 buttons down here, but this enormous rack, 2 rack space or 3 rack space. I think it's 2. Anyway, massive thing, right? That was the studio box that then became the DC2W. And it's got both options. Now, the rack, to my ears, the rack version is slightly more subtle effect than the pedal version when you go to the standard mode. But it's only got 4 buttons, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 at the top. That's it. You can plug in. You can press 2 down at a time if you want to get combinations.
Cool.
That's it. Right? That's all you got. And they go from mostly still, slightly modulated, to more wobbly and wider, and just different. But it's this 3-dimensional type chorusing that uses phasing. It's a very clever way. Anyway, it sounds amazing. but I wanted it to be the Eventide because that's the Eddie Van Halen sound, right? I went and every fiber of my being, I went, that's the old H949 Eventide processor and a bit of wobble in it, and that's the Eddie Van Halen sound. Then I took that out of line and I just put the Boss pedal there, still in stereo, setting 1, so it wasn't really moving much. And not only did it basically do the same sound, right? Because it's a slight modulation, slight pitch shifting, and it was pretty much still, so it worked. But what was amazing to me was the DC2W put so much more back into the tone. It didn't suck the tone as much, which I just super surprised. And I'm only telling that story because it's true, because it happened, and I was surprised that it happened, because I did expect, because the Eventide, that's the classic Eventide effect, is the micro pitch shifting.
Yep.
But I would say that the DC2W did it better, and because of the improved buffers that are on the DC2W, because they're superior, because the Wazacraft pedal, it was much more transparent. So the top end was clearer. The mid-range wasn't as gutsed, whether that's to do with the way that the phasing works on the DC2W or not, but it sounded better, and I didn't want it to, but it did. It's a great pedal. DC2W, love it.
I actually wrote down when you first mentioned it, and you said it was your favorite pedal. I wrote down to come back to that, and you've just covered it.
Got to have one of those. That's. Yeah.
I remember them, the old ones with the push buttons. I never actually did play one, but
neither did I back in the day. No, I didn't either.
Yeah, I thought, I want some controls to play with, not just push button presets.
Right.
But
me too. Yeah.
Whenever I do add any chorusing or the slight pitch shifting thing, trying to get that Ed Van Halen thing, like you say, the middle gets sucked out.
Yep.
I need to try me one of these DC2Ws.
Man, and there's all those variations of it, right? There's anyone who's completely not a tweaker at this point is just fallen off watching this YouTube feed, because this is getting real tweaky. But there's all the theories about how Eddie did that, right? Like whether he did a little bit of pitch shifting up, a little bit down, right? And that was the sound, and that was just stereo. And there's other schools that say, well, there's a dry one in the middle, as well as those outside ones, so wet, dry, wet. So I think he did various things over the years, and he had a dry setting and then a slightly pitch shift setting. So there's 100 ways to skin that cat, and you can try them all. And you could actually run a dry signal straight up the center as well and bleed a little bit into each side to have that still being, pure through it as well. So there's a bunch of ways to push those elements back in that are sucked out by the modulation. I think you still put them back in, but you should try DC2W, man, because it's a glorious thing. It's the king of choruses, even though it's just different to most other choruses, but it's certainly the king of choruses for me. That's just
very cool. And yeah, okay, that's on my wish list of Boss pedals to get.
Got to try it.
Now, I took a little note before, because you said the term Boss Katana and how they rule the world, and they totally do when it comes to the smaller amp market these days, don't they?
Yeah.
Tell me about
Katana is oh man.
Tell us about
Katana's
those.
Been a journey, man. Yeah. So Katana is it's easy to say these things when you're on top of the hill, but everybody has their day in the sun. Not everybody, but people will have their day in the sun at different times. So I'm not saying this is Katana's all there's ever been and all there ever be. It's having its day in the sun, but it's fair to say that Katana's having a day and a half, at least, maybe a week in the sun, because it's just been such a success story, and it's well deserved, because it's a great sounding little amp. So the Katana story, it's interesting, because it's kind of a modeling amp, but it's not, and we don't use the term modeling in it because, and I'll tell you kind of why. Everyone in that arena, like Line 6 and Vox and everybody else, and has good sounding stuff. I don't think there's really a bad sounding modeling amp anymore. That's kind of those times have kind of gotten. You really have to look for something that sounds completely atrocious these days, right? Like most things sound pretty good, and that's because everyone got their shit together with software, right? Like everyone got a really good algorithm, or got some good programmers they teamed up with, or whatever it was. And over a period of time, that just improved and improved. But what didn't seem to change, people led with software. Like people would say, we've got the best modeling. It's like, okay, so it's always led with software. Whoever has the best algorithm wins, right? So everything else is just a pretty box and an amplifier and making it get louder, right? So that was sort of interesting. And that was the way it was for a long time. And then Katana kind of pulled it back a notch and went a bit simpler, right? Not menu driven, because people were getting crazy. And I used to say this at guitar clinics. When things had more buttons, I'd go, that's great. This will be easier to use. The worst thing that used to happen in the late 90s, it started to happen, I reckon, or mid-late 90s, interface became cleaner and cleaner. Look at the interface. It's beautiful on a marketing page. Dial, 2 buttons and a screen. Who couldn't work that? Fact was, when you got into it, it was horrendous to work, right? A guitar tuner would be 47 pages down and 3 of those and step sideways and dance. And, you know, like it was so hard to work those and just not intuitive. So with things like the GTs, like GT6 and GT8 and GT10 and GT100, more buttons, better. You know, like just one button, one purpose. If I could do that, the BRs used to be like that, the Boss recorders. It's like one button that just does that one. Effects. What's in that? You know, like one button, one purpose. It's awesome. So the more buttons, the better. And Katana just went back to a bunch of knobs, you know, and like some lights and some knobs, different colored lights, but it looked like a guitar amp.
Yep.
It's like, okay, that doesn't look like a modeling amp, right? Okay. And then the algorithm, like the software part of it, the amplifiers and the effects and the EQing, the tone stack, I guess, if you will, of the tube amp world, that section is digital. That's where they make all the sounds, right?
Yep.
But the things with Katanas and the things that we know matter in a guitar amp are the input stage that gets your guitar in there in the first place, and the thing that makes it louder, and the speaker that it runs through, right? These are the things that we know make a guitar amp sound good. And with Katana, there's a trend. I'll go back the other side for a minute. There's also a trend to use digital power amps in these small amps because it was the most accurate representation of your software coming out. It's the cleanest. All right, so they might use a full range speaker, maybe guitar speaker, but sometimes a full range speaker, a digital power amp, because that would be the most perfect representation. So it would just make it louder. But again, volume changes everything, doesn't it? That would be perfect if everything stayed the same as you turned it up, but it does not, does it? Right? And those amps, you know, a lot of the competition, you turn them up to a certain level and they'll start to be harsh and like throwing razor blades at your ears, right? It just gets really not very nice. Everything sounds fine at low volumes, but again, volume sorts out the men from the boys, right? So you turn it up and that's where they really didn't work. So the Katana, where they took a step back to old school, I guess, as well as the interface just having knobs there, used a solid state analog power amp, a push-pull, a class AB solid state analog power amp, push-pull relationship with the speaker like a real valve amp does, right? So a real valve amp has this bidirectional relationship between the power amp and the speaker that's constantly evolving and pushing back both ways. I think most people think that a guitar amp works from the front to back. I know I always did. Front guitar goes in, at the speaker the sound comes out, and it's all one way all the way through, and it's not, right? It's a whole ebbing and flowing things of conversation. Yeah, it's reactive. That's exactly right. So the speaker's excursion and different things about the speaker would feed back to the power amp, make that sound different, and it's got this thing going on all the time. With a digital power amp, not so much. It just doesn't work in the same way. So the Class AB power amp would give you that push-pull, and as you turn it up, we all know the guitar amp, as you turns it up, has a lot to do with the power amp and the tones that the power amp produces and how that's, you know, sags or reacts to its environment and the volume and whatever you're pushing through it and whatever it's trying to push it to. So that power amp in the Katana is part of the secret sauce. It just sounds like a real guitar amp's power amp. The amps, all of that section, the effects section sound good, but what makes it louder and makes it change in a good way as it gets louder, those gnarly frequencies that push through a cymbal and a tom and a snare and a vocal and a bass and all of those things at you at the same time, and then you push your guitar amp through it, all those gnarly frequencies start to come out and they get pushed forward like a real guitar amp. So that's a major part of it. And also the other part is the input stage, which has a really high headroom in the input stage. So a lot of modeling equipment, even good stuff, often doesn't handle gain pedals or anything that's putting out a lot of output in your input stage. It's made for a guitar input, a high impedance guitar input, and that's it. And you try and push anything else through it, it starts to squish it. a lot of people, think that that's sort of happening through the modeling, and it can, but it certainly can happen at that input stage as well, because it's just not built to take anything other than guitar input. Right? So that's important. Not everything is. I'm not saying everything, just for people who want to smash me in the comments. But certainly that level where Katana is, pretty much is everything. So there you go, smash me on that if you like. So the Katana has got a lot of headroom in the input stage, so it can handle a distortion pedal, a gain pedal naturally, like a guitar amp does. So getting the input right, secret sauce in the middle, modeling, guitar amp, sounds, and effects, and then at the end you've got a true power amp for it to come out and amplify with. That's really the secret sauce of Katana. There's a lot more to it, of course. That's not a product demo of any sort, but it does explain the technology of why it seems that Katana just keeps on winning the day, because you stick that up against a drum kit, and that's where it still works. And I had a few guys at the guitar show a couple of years ago, one of the Melbourne Guitar Show. They came around. There's like 3 or 4 guys. They come and go, we all want to buy a guitar amp. What do you got? We're all going to buy one, so we want a deal. Blah blah blah. I said, okay, well, we've got Katanas. Yeah, we've heard about Katanas. Why do you think they're better? I said, well, okay, we went through the whole thing. I went through the whole spiel. I said, but don't buy it yet. I'll take a risk, because these guys are just having a crack. I said, don't buy it. I don't want you to buy it yet. I want you to go around and try all the other brands' modeling amps.
Yep.
But I want you to turn it up. So I want you to give it a good crank. So to play it and get the demo and all that, and then turn it up and tell me how it sounds. Does it sound nice to your ears? Does it sound really harsh? How does it sound? And so they come back around. I'll just take a risk. I might have lost all 4 of them by doing that. But they came back around. They went, yeah, you're right. And that's what it is. It's like, turn it up. Check it out at volume, because that's when you know. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Katanas, and all the models of Katanas are like that. And the Katana Artist, which is the sort of the upper level one, that has a superior speaker in it. So it's a speaker from the Wazacraft amps that we had, which was like a large form factor head and quad box 4x12 head and 4x12 solid state amp, which is sort of the forerunner to Katana. It's just like blues, like the blues cubes are as well, I guess you would say. But that same sort of technology trickled down into Katana. So that speaker that's in the Katana Artist is taken from that, which is like, I saw a presentation in Japan where how they developed that speaker. It was amazing. Basically, I think it was a greenback, and they scanned the cone for all the indentations and everything, and made this higher wattage version of a greenback, basically.
Wow.
So it's that's what's in it. It's even got a green magnet figure on the back of it. So Katana Artist actually sounds even better when you turn it up, because of the speaker and the configuration of the amp.
Cool. Now, I said Katana, and then I sort of referred to them as being the smaller practice amp kind of things, but they actually, you guys make those in quite big models too, right? They come in bigger sizes?
There's a head and cab as well, yeah. The head is like this big. It's so cool, and it's got a little 5-watt speaker in it for practicing. So you can actually take it out and just take it home as a little practice amp, and then take it back, plug it into a cab, and it sounds enormous. Cool. I've got 3 friends who are serious guitar players in Sydney who now gig with them. I just can't bring myself, because I'm too married to all of my gear that I'm using right now. But I know that they sound great. And for you and me, the new ones, the Mark IIs, have all got stereo link. All the 100 watts have got stereo link. So at the back, you can go stereo out to that one, and all the modulation effects and delays are in glorious stereo.
Yes. Right. Love it.
That's it.
Love it.
So they're great sounding amp. I highly recommend you getting in and just cranking them, because they're just various versions of classic British tone, pretty much.
Now, I'm just checking out some of the comments here. Stu Brady wants to know. Stu Brady wants to know.
No, he doesn't get a say. No,
he doesn't get a say. Okay, I'll hit that ban button right now.
He's the bass player in my band. What's he said?
Are rack units dead, or do you think there will be a revival?
What do you mean dead? What do you mean revival? Revival is only necessary if they died in the first place. And Stu, you and I both know they still live.
I'm just going to grab something. Speaking of rack units.
He's baiting me, Rick. He's baiting me.
That happens.
Yes. Rack units are alive and well in the lives of people such as Rick and myself. What's he got?
Sorry,
What's he
I
got?
had to run up the back behind me. There's still some more.
I know what you. Yep.
I picked these up recently.
I think I know what you got. Which ones are they? The Q and the. Can't quite read it. What is it? Compressor or something?
Sampler delay.
And
and the graphic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's those two.
Great little unit. Yep.
I haven't fired them up yet. Are these good?
They are good little units. I've got down home. I went down to Tassie at Christmas. Sorry, like a couple of months ago, whenever it was. And I found I've still got the power supply unit and the compressor unit for that. And I used to have more of them. They, you had the mini rack. You ever see the pictures?
What was the last two? What was the last two units you just mentioned?
I've just got the compressor and the power supply one. There's one that's just a power. Oh, you can't. How good's that?
I just picked them up.
Rack? You have the actual mini rack though. You got to get that.
No. I was at a friend's place a couple of weeks ago, and he said, "Come with me. See, just come with me. Check this out." And he had this big storage container in his backyard, and he said, as he was opening it, he said, "Yeah, my father-in-law and I buy these random storage containers, and not knowing what's in them, and sometimes there's got some
I've heard about that.
Cool stuff in there.
Right.
Is any of this any good to you?" And he had a whole bunch of music stuff in there. I grabbed a few pedals, those units. This as a power supply.
Yeah, I've got that one. I think that's the one. Yeah, I've got that one in the compressor.
It's trying to focus on my eyes, but if I cover that.
RPW7.
Is that any good? Is that best?
Yeah, they're great little units.
Yeah, like to run pedals and things off, or are they more suited?
Oh yeah. No, that'd be fine. It depends what the power out. I don't know what the power output is on them. I can't remember actually, off the top of my head. There'll be someone that does. Those things had a real cult following. You really? Remember those being out? I'm just trying to remember what years it was, but.
So now that you mentioned the rack,
you had the mini rack.
That was So I've just stacked them on top of each other, and that just brought back the memories of that was a half rack.
Yeah, there's a mini rack. There was a mini half rack tower that they went in, like their own little mini rack.
Yeah. So I haven't fired these up yet,
right?
but
the same sort of thing.
But yeah, I just was thinking, what do I have that's Roland or Boss? Oh, right behind me there.
There you go. Yeah, classic.
So
classic, mate.
Rack units are not dead. Not dead at all.
Absolutely not.
You know what? No. I'm going to say I mentioned my ADA back there. It's all backwards. There's a quadriverb underneath that. I'm going to reprogram those and maybe go out and start using those to gig with again. Just MIDI recoil and all that. But there has been a bit of a resurgence in rack gear. ADAs, JMP1s, all that kind of thing.
Even H3000s now are ridiculous money.
Yeah,
they're like $4,000 to buy a 30-year-old piece of technology. I had one. I had a H3000 DSX, the one with the squiggly line on it, with the vibe presets, the one with the red squiggly lines on it. I had one of those years ago, but I didn't know. I was like an amateur. I was like 22 or something when I bought it. I think it was $5,000. I was going to have to pay it off, and I didn't realize that most of those guys who run them in their racks either run two of them, or run them just for one thing, like just pitch shifting or just reverb, because to change patches takes about 2 seconds. Doing click, and you hear the click as it changes the algorithm. You're like, I remember the first time I did that, and I was buying this for a live rack that I was going to switch patches with. I can't use it, so I ended up selling it or sending it back or something, whatever I did. And I bought a GP100, a Roland GP100, which was a rack, gold-plated single rack space, preamp and multi-effects.
Yep.
And I didn't use the preamp section of it, although I did get later on in years in duos and different things that I'd play direct, and it sounded really good. That's sort of one of those old things that the modeling isn't as good in it because the amps aren't quite as true as far as, it would have been 16-bit and it just wasn't, it's a bit grainy. But the thickness, like a lot of that old stuff, it had this low mid-range thickness that got lost at different times in future technologies. It's back now with things, but for a few years there, it's like, things got nicer. I think there's something with keyboard sounds too. things got nicer and compressed and just a nicer, more direct end recorded sound. But live, they didn't quite, they lost a bit of the oomph in it for live. GP100 was a great unit for that, and I ran that along with different heads that I'd run. But that was that unit switched pretty much instantly, and I used that, and that was fantastic. But the Eventide, it broke my heart that I couldn't use what my guitar heroes used, because it was ridiculously impractical for a Tasmanian cover band guitar player.
But I was the same, mate, where I would see all these guys using it and assume that, oh well, that'll just cover everything for me if I had something like that. But not the case.
Wouldn't.
Not the case.
No. I think they do now. I mean, they're magnificent units, but they're bazillions of dollars.
Now, I was just having a look through the comments there, and my friend NATO that said he had the Roland Bolt 60. He says he uses that. He's been through every amp under the sun, and it's the cleanest amp he's ever used. And I love it more. Love it more than my Rivera 5512, and it takes pedals like a demon.
Wow, that's a big call.
It is a big call.
Rivera. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know. I can't even pretend to know about that. The Bolt 60. There you go. But I'll believe him. There's some good. I mean, there's good pedal platforms are a different type of amp, right? Like something can be a good pedal platform and be rubbish as far as gain or anything goes, but it can be a really good pedal platform. That's just a completely different way of quantifying your amp, right? You go, well, that channel's got a great gain channel. That one's a good pedal platform. Doesn't mean it sounds any good. It means it's a good pedal platform, right? And it sounds good once you run pedals into it. It's not, one's not necessarily the same as the other.
I'm like that, mate. I hear people talk about, oh, that's a great pedal platform amp. I'm like, well, I want an amp I could just walk up to, plug my guitar and a cable straight into it and just go, fuck yeah.
Me too. Run everything roughly on 5. That'll about do. Should sound good then. If it doesn't sound good like that,
Friedman small
Friedman's
box
are complicated.
Is what I'm going to get my hands back on again. I was playing one of those for a couple of years,
right?
And people would be like, "How are you changing channels, man?" I'm not. I'm just hitting it different. And just that reactive
volume
and
control.
Absolutely.
Guitar volume, the lost art of the guitar volume, right?
Yep.
Like that, and a little bit of chorus of delay on the front. There's your clean sound. Crank it back up again, turn that off. There's your dirt. There's your second channel.
Absolutely.
It's like the lost art of guitar control. But I haven't played through a small box. I hear they're glorious. I've got a B100 that I got. I got the brown eye when I was for my 40th birthday, and that's a glorious thing. It's the BE. It's kind of like, it's not quite a Plexi, it's not quite a JCM 800, it's not quite any Marshall that you know, but it's kind of like the Marshall that you want in a bunch of ways. It's not puristically any of those other things, because it's not, but you can get close to enough to it of all of those things. Plus, you get a few switches and different things. I mean, I love that amp. I'll be buried with that amp. That's one that, I often say my coffin will be shaped like that, and there's a little BE next to me, because that bury me with that one. But I hear the small box is awesome. I've heard some demos online with what's his name, Michael Nielsen, and they're great. Sounds fantastic.
That's the amp I want to get again.
Dave can do no wrong. Come on, man. Jeez.
Absolutely. I got to say, I had the pleasure of sitting with Dave. With a few different amps of his, and I'll be honest, I got it on video. We'd both been out drinking the night before, and I was sitting there playing. There wasn't many words exchanged in between, but he knew exactly what I was talking about. I'd be playing. I really loved the Steve Stevens head when I had that next to a B100, and I'd be playing, and I'd sort of pick on something in the sound that I liked or didn't like, or it was liked, and I'd sort of play something that really emphasized that, and I'd just turn to him and just say, "How do you do that?" And he knew exactly what I'm talking about. And he'd go, "Oh," and he'd start spitting out some technical jargon.
He does read guitar players well, doesn't he? That's why he's that guy. I think he can just, like, by a look or by what you play, he goes, "Oh yeah." So and he'll, like, you see him.
That's what you're digging, and
you just knew, He just knows. That's why he's the guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he's and he was raving about the I hear he was raving. I didn't hear him say it, but I heard it back from a few people that he was raving about there was a tube expander as well.
He was, and so was Steve Stevens.
Yeah.
I had Steve Stevens on for a chat last year, and he called in nice and early, like half an hour beforehand, and we were just sitting around having a good old chat. And I said to him, because I went to see Billy Idol in Brisbane only a couple months before that, and I just said to him, man, your tone was just kicking. It was just next level. And he said, man, I've started using the Boss Tube Amp expander. And he started telling me the story of how his tech connected it one time, gave it a try at sound check, and he said the sound guy just over the microphone was like, man, you've got to hear this from out the front. And he said his wireless...
Was he running direct? Was he running direct from the back, or was he running still running... Yeah, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so that's great. So he was going through it to his cabs, but then taking a feed out of it to front of house.
Front of house. Yeah.
And he just said that is how he'll always run his rig now. And it's one of those really, those few transparent things. I mean, I shouldn't say I lost count, but I've had a lot of those juice extractor type product, like units over the years. I can't remember if I had a Marshall Power Brake, but I've certainly used one at one point. And then Rockman had one, and then I've had a couple of THDs, the Bad Cat leash, the Sir one, the reactive load. So I've had too many of these over the years, and they all have various. They just change things slightly, right? Like some things are like hitting a brick wall for the amplifier, so they change it too much, and that's like the older style ones were just designed to take the heat off it, right? And they just, but you lost it. You lost that thing that there was some sponginess and some pushback that you lost because I've heard that described. For the amplifier, it's like seeing a brick wall instead of a speaker. It just doesn't get anything back. It's just going bang and it's hitting. It's just not. It's not working in that ebb and flow that we talked about earlier, the way it's supposed to. Whereas, like the reactive load, that does it because it's reactive. But with the Wazacraft Tube Expander, you've got various speaker configurations that amp can see. Not what necessarily comes out the other side, because that's IRs and, like the load impulse responses in there to have various sounding cabs, but feeling cabs. That's the part of the secret sauce anyway. The Wazacraft Tube Expander. Yeah, right. There's a bunch of great nerd stuff in that, but it's the fact that you can choose your configuration of speaker that your amp is feeling, makes it feel it back, right? As they say, it's not how an amp plays you. It's not how you play an amp. It's how it plays you back. You've got to have something going both ways, right? Like any instrument, and that's part of that. And that, like I said, there's many parts of Wazacraft Tube Expander, but part of that is selecting whether it's a 212 or a quad box. Or any other configuration. So what you usually run that amp into, so what it usually feels like when you play it, and that's part of it. And the IRs, and then the power amp, and then there's so many more things. There was a Tube Expander that make it sound great, but certainly being able to dictate, because a lot of those other ones were just either like hitting a brick wall or a set speaker configuration. So there's a couple of, and I won't start naming names because I don't want to do that. But certainly other reactive loads are usually set on a type of speaker configuration, and that's it. Don't necessarily even say what that is. It might be a 212 configuration, it might be a 412 configuration, but it's kind of just one. Whereas with the Tube Expander, you can select which one you want your amp to see, and that would be appropriate if you're running a Fender in, and you want it to see a 212, you want a Marshall, and you want it to see a 412, because that's how it'll feel more natural to you when you play it. So that's certainly a huge advantage with the Tube Expander. And that's something that I haven't heard any of the other guys talk about. I've got a 2 notes torpedo Captor X right here. Yeah. I've got a Fryette power station just back here. Yes. But as far as I'm aware, both those, the load is reactive, but set to a particular configuration.
Oh, what is it? Yeah.
So what
the Wazacraft Tube Expander has a whole thing, diagram on the top. I just actually might want to Tube Expander. I'm just trying to think what that. trying to remember what the diagram looks like at the top. You might want to bring that up because it shows a bunch of stuff. I always say it's got its instruction manual on the lid. It's kind of got, just trying to think where the top is. There it is. Okay, so if you bring up a picture, where is it? Open imaging, new tab.
Let's see if I can navigate the website while I'm got this software.
Yeah, well, if you can bring up, if you just search for Wazacraft Expander and search the top down, like the photo of the top of it, it shows you how many of these are available. But I'll just start telling you before you bring that up. So it's labeled recommended setting of reactive load, right? So not too many units where you can have a setting for the reactive load. It's just either reactive load or it isn't, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But this one starts with mini combo, which is a 1x8 speaker. And it changes the resonance and presence as well. So mini combo, which is a 1x8, deluxe combo, which is a 1x12. There's about two different 112s. There's a 212, there's a 410 or two 410s, and 4 different quad boxes closed back with various resonance and presence to them. So that's kind of major, right? So the fact that your amp, because, we speak in weird terms, don't we? Brown sound, soft, it's all about how you feel and how those descriptive words come out of feelings, right?
Yep.
So that feeling does change things, and it's not a setting in there because it doesn't change things. It certainly does.
Wow.
So you get to select what you want it to feel like, and you get to change them and just see what they sound like, how they do change it. I mean, you might like the way your Plexi sounds like through a 1x8 inch speaker that you would never want to hear it through, but you might like the way it feels through it. Who knows? They're all
I would really like to do a shootout between the other load boxes I've got here and one of those.
Yep.
Just to see if that is something I can feel when I'm playing, hear a difference. Now, what else?
And by the way, I didn't mean to say any of them sound bad. They all sound good. All of those units, those 2 units you just listed there, sound great. They all sound various degrees of good. Just,
what other tricks does
does
the Tube Amp Expander have up its sleeve? Does it have built-in effects as well? Or?
Yep. Got built-in effects, yep. So it's got a compressor, delay, reverb. It's kind of got effects that would be appropriate for post-production. So I like to say that it's like the closest you can get to a post-production effect live, because you've got, usually when you're on your effects in your effects loop, even the cleanest effects you want in your effects loop, like reverb and delay, let's make it real simple, right? Reverb and delay. You want those as clean as you possibly can. But the fact is, when they go out of your preamp into them and back into your power amp, you actually want power amp distortion, right? So as you turn it up, you're going to get some power amp distortion. Guess what that does to your lovely, pristine 24-bit delays and reverbs? Your pristine quality, studio quality reverbs and delays get squished into this valve power amp. And that's fine, but it's not exactly how you actually wanted it, because they're transparent effects. You want them to be transparent. They're not once they're colored by the power amp, right? So what you really want is no effects through your amp other than in the front. And then after your amp, after it's mic'd up, then you want the front of house guy to add some reverb and delay, because that's the only way they're actually going to be transparent. Or in a recording scenario, added later through the studio monitors and everything.
Yeah.
So with the Wazacraft Expander, you can crank your amp head into it, get it exactly where you like, add pristine digital reverbs and delays. Some of the algorithms from the RV500 and DD500, I think they are, from memory. I think that's right. But then you amplify them. It has an amplifier in it as well that stays clean. It's a solid state power amp, right? So it stays cleaner than a valve power amp. So as you reamp it and you turn it up again, you've got these pristine, clean reverbs and delays after your amp's already mashed its signal into there and it's got all that juicy goodness to it. But you're not doing that to the delays and reverbs. You've got those in a beautiful, like, studio quality as much as your speaker configuration will allow, because that'll squish it a bit too, right? Your speakers, but it's just a clean version. So to me, it's like, it's as close as you can get live to running post-production effects that you add in your studio later.
Cool. So
in that way, it's some super clean.
Do you have to use that solid state power amp that's in it, or can you go through to your speaker cabs and just use the IRs and everything.
You can go straight through.
Yep.
Let me just find if you find a photo of.
It's probably a picture of the rear of it, right?
Yeah. It shows all the ins and outs. That'd be a better way to do it because you can see there. Where are we? Open image in new tab. There. So, more ins and outs.
I think I saw the front panel.
Yeah, because it's got its own effects loop as well. So you can also run your own effects as well as the built-in ones.
Okay. That was another question, was whether it had an
Yeah,
effects loop.
Yeah, series of parallel, of course. So you can, run the different options. Where are we? Speaker out A and B. I don't know the damn configuration of it. Where are we? Ed Lim, our current guitar guy, and boss guitar guy, is looking at me, shaking his head right now. I have no doubt. If he's watching. Ed, and if you're not watching, why aren't you watching, Ed? Shout out to Ed. Where is it? Input level. So you set the input level. Yep. And there's the impedance, parallel speaker outputs. I can't remember in the configuration if you can have it going straight through. I can't remember. I think it all goes to reactive load and gets reamped. I don't think. No, I can't remember off the top of my head. Rick, I'm not going to say.
That's okay, mate. I would rather
remember.
You not spread
I'll
disinformation.
find out for you. No. Because there's just so much in there. I haven't used it like that, certainly. I've only ever used it to reamp. And where is it? I want to say something else about it. Second.
I'd look it up over here, but it's actually quite hard to navigate the web page
where it's going
and steer my my streaming software at the same time.
Well, so you can run, post that you can also run the effects are in stereo, even though you're probably just running a mono amp through it. But the effects are in stereo, so you can run the direct outs and the IRs, whatever IR you want to select, to the front of house. So you've got all that in glorious stereo as well. Even though you're just running, normal mono on stage, but because most people I hear, unlike you and me, Rick, most people I hear run mono amps. I don't know
what's wrong with them.
I know exactly. That's what I would say too. But the best bit of nerdity, my favorite bit of nerdity about the Wazacraft expander, is its use of the Fletcher-Munson curve. Who gets to use that in a sentence ever, right? So Fletcher-Munson curve. Here's my basic guitar player explanation.
Go.
Is how how the human ear perceives frequencies as they get louder. So if you had something that was completely flat response barking at you and you turned it up and it still sounded the same and read the same as far as the frequencies are being thrown at you, you would perceive it differently as it gets louder or softer. That's what your ears do. So in the Wazacraft expander, you can turn on or off the ability to, as you turn it up or down with the amplifier that's on board, it allows for the Fletcher-Munson curve, so it can sound the same as you bring the volume down, even though you've got the amp cranked to the hilt. You turn it on or off, because you will notice, like as you turn it down without it on, it does perceive to the EQ, the perception of the EQ changes. But if you turn that setting on, as you turn it up, it appears to say exactly the same, getting louder. So
it's gradual. It's not like, oh, we've hit this threshold and bang, it kicks in.
It's a moving feast. Yeah, because
awesome.
It changes that the Fletcher-Munson curve is a moving feast. It doesn't say the same. It accentuates slightly in different frequencies. It goes up. There are wonderful graphs, but done by much smarter people than me on the internet. You can look that up, but you just don't get to throw in. It allows for the Fletcher-Munson curve into a product demo ever. So I thought that was the ultimate bit of guitar nerdity, that it will allow you to
really
have perception
cool
of the
feature.
same.
That's a really cool feature.
Awesome. It's just so crazy. Like, who thinks to put those things in? It's awesome.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I'm interested just in the effects that are in it as well. Is it just like reverbs, delays,
and compressor?
And compressor. Yep.
Reverb, delay, compressor. Yeah, and then you get effects like to add whatever you like. But it really is designed to be those effects that you would run, the clean effects you run at the end of the chain, right? Because that is the end of the chain. That's after the amplifier. That's after the power amp, after the speaker, after everything.
Yep.
You know, theoretically, the way that runs. So it is only those effects. Unless you're going to run, you know, you're probably not going to run. Well, you'd run you can run modulation over it afterwards if you want. I mean, you know, there's that thing where you run modulation in the front or in the, you know, in the effects loop. Either way, it sounds different, but it serves different purposes. So you could try that, but it's basically got the effects that, you know, you would most likely use in that position of the chain, and they're beautiful and pristine effects. And like I said, as they get amplified, they stay more like that rather than getting, you know, tube squished, which is wonderful and all, but you don't necessarily want your reverbs and delays to get the tube squished. You know, at the end, you'd like them to sound like they're supposed to sound, unless you're the edge and you run them in the front and you want that distortion on them, and at least the creasing distortion and all that sort of stuff. And that's a whole other thing.
Well, it works for Brian May as well. Brian May also.
Yeah, that's right.
His, yep. So.
What a glorious sound live! My God, it's incredible.
What's that? Brian May.
Brian May. Oh, yes. Yeah, live. That's amazing. I
saw them just before COVID hit. It was their last show in Australia. They were about to jump on a plane the next day and fly back home, and that was the last big show.
Yeah.
Before COVID hit and changed things for a lot of people.
Yeah. Talking about guitar control, that man's the master, right? It's one sound, one gain stage, everything's just on. I bought talking about Greg Fryer in Berg's thing, right? And I had a chance to speak to Greg Fryer, who makes his treble boosters, and I got a lovely guy, right? And I talked to him on the phone, and I just started extracting stories. Like an hour later, he's still telling me stories about them, going, oh, how good are they? And he's so quietly spoken and gentlemanly, right? He's just like, oh, yes, and then this happened, and this. I'm going, it's a magnificent story, Greg. He's like, oh, yeah, but, you know, we just did this, and he's so mild-mannered, you know, but he was, you know, he was saying which one to buy for the rack unit, the Morgan rack unit. That's, you know, like the Morgan AC rack unit, because I want to run it into that, into the Synergy unit. And we're talking about that, but because he said, because Brian just has the one that there's no on switch, it's just on. It's always on. It's just, you know, attached to his strap, and that's it. It's like, there's no channel switch, and all the, you know, all the buttons are shaved off the top of those boxes, and they're just like a cranked empty container as far as tone goes. They just sit there and wait to be blasted in the front end. So he's the master of that volume control and pickup selection.
Well, Greg was sending me prototypes because I was playing in a Queen tribute show, and he was sending me prototypes to run before he'd send them to the boss. And there was no on-off switch or level switch. It was just plug into this, and that's the sound. And one really interesting thing with that was that you had to have it the very first thing in your signal chain, even before your wireless, which is why Brian May has it on his strap, because it needs to go from the guitar to that, then to the wireless. Otherwise, that whole thing of rolling back the volume knob does not work.
Don't work.
And so I've got this.
And there's something that needs not a buffer in front of it. There we go. That shouldn't have a buffer in front of it, or it won't work. It's a classic example, right? Don't run a Boss pedal before that. It won't work the same way. So I eventually got the one that's the deluxe, which has got all the different touring models in it, because he wasn't quite sure in the end how it would react with the preamp rather than just a Vox. He could tell me that, but he went, I don't know what it's going to work like. And it was a great decision, because it's just got a bunch of different variations. And like you said, you got to be able to mess with stuff, right? That's what did your head in about the DC2. So I can't just have 4 buttons. That's not enough options. I've got to have tweakability. But you know, that guy doesn't need it. Brian probably knows better. You know, whenever you think, you know, like go, they're doing that, but I think maybe I want this. They're probably right.
You know,
I reckon.
A big part of his sound, people overlook that, is the fact that he plays through a coin, and I've got one right there.
Aha! Look at that. The 16th, isn't it?
It is, but that one actually had his own head instead of the Queen's head. Whoops, back that way. 'Cause it's all backwards. No, can't see that one. But that's actually Brian's head. See the hair?
Oh yeah, yes, of course. unmistakable. Yeah,
So I was using
fantastic.
5-cent pieces because the sixpence has been long discontinued.
Yeah.
And the Australian 5-cent piece is the closest thing to a sixpence
Is that right?
in shape and just the serrated edge as well. And
The serrated edge.
that is such a big part of his sound, man. If you're trying to play
So
something
you
like,
use that in the tribute. You use that in the tribute band.
oh yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah.
That's cool. I like that level of nerdity. That's good.
My last show I did with them, we played with Icehouse, and
Right.
we were told don't try and meet Ivor Davies. He's a very private person. Ivor Davies turns out is a huge Brian May fan, and he tracked me down, and I couldn't get rid of the guy. That sounds wrong, but no.
Fantastic.
His tour manager was tapping him on the shoulder, going, "Dude, everyone's in the car waiting for you," you know. And he's like, "Man, I'm talking to Brian.
I'm talking to Brian. Yeah.
Yeah. But he said to me,
5-cent piece. So that's interesting.
he said to me,
"Yeah,
you were using the coin." I said, "Yeah." How do you know? He goes, "Because as we were playing, I'm seeing these 5-cent pieces everywhere, and I'm bumping the guys in the band, pointing at them, going, he's using the coin. He's using the coin."
So you're dropping them like Brian. Because that's the thing with Brian, isn't it? He drops them because he uses such a feather-light touch. And
I did drop them a lot, so I'd have them everywhere. Just to, there goes another. Yeah, very hard to hold on to. But you adjust to it, you get used to it. And that's, man, you try and play something like Under Pressure, that intro, and not use that coin. Man, that just doesn't sound right. It needs that chirp, that metal on metal. That happens at the start.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Josh, we've been blabbing on for 2 hours already, mate.
I know. Well, I have been. Yeah, you're right.
And as I said at the start, I wanted to use this one as a bit of a get to know you for the viewers, so that I can have you back on in the future when we have new and exciting things from Roland to talk about, Roland and Boss. And
I'd love to get some of the other guys on too. Some of our current product guys.
Please do.
They've got some great nuggets. So maybe we can bring them in. I might even there are some other special guests who might be able to get up the chain a little bit maybe at some point too. I'll see how we go with that.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, it'd be good to get some of our other product guys on too. Would be very, very useful. I mean, I've got some legacy stories. They have some more current stories sometimes, I would think, about some of the more current products. So it's always useful having those guys on. So guys like Ed Lim, and he's our current guitar guy. Matt Walsham, who's our sales manager, but was the previous guitar product specialist. They'd have some great stuff to share. So yeah, maybe we can do a bit of an all-in talk at different times. I think
that's very doable, mate. With, as you saw, just the link that I sent you to get you in, I think I can have up to 4 guests come in.
Great.
Quite simply by sending that link. So, let's do that.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Excellent.
Mate, I've got quite a backlog of these things now with some great guests. I think it's only a matter of time before the YouTube algorithm picks up on me and starts putting these in people's faces. And when it does, it'd be nice to have some regulars like yourself and the Boss team to come along. But
more than happy to.
Josh, thank you so much for your time tonight, mate.
Thank you very much for listening to me, Rick, and thank you to anyone who's watching. See,
you said you liked the applause before, and I ran them up. Thanks, ladies. Yeah, they're all just over there.
That's lovely. Thanks, Rick.
Folks.
Appreciate it.
That did tune in and watch this, even if you're watching this back as a podcast on all your favorite podcast sites, because I do upload those later to those as well. Because some people like to listen to these and not watch. It was Charles Cillier that put the idea in my head. One of Australia's best luthiers. He's saying, man, I really love watching your podcast, but it distracts me from my work. I'm trying to work on these guitars, and any chance you can upload them, just the audio, so I can listen to them as I'm driving around and keep my eyes on the road. That's a great idea.
There's a lot of work in his guitars. He makes some beautiful guitars.
Doesn't he?
Makes great instruments. Wow.
I think I should get him on for a bit of a chat as well, if you're
that's
Charles.
A great idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Hey, once again, mate, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to hit the magic button.
Thanks,
and it's
Rick.
the end screen button. It's this one right here. And when I hit that, this magic logo goes